The most expensive aircraft carrier ever built, the USS Gerald R. Ford. The USS Gerald R. Ford was not designed to become the most expensive warship ever built. That happened anyway. When the Navy presented Congress with the original budget in 2007, the number was $10.5 billion. By the time it was commissioned in 2017, 2 years late, the bill had reached $13.3 billion for the hull alone. Add the $4.7 billion spent on research and development for 23 unproven technologies installed simultaneously, and the true cost of getting this ship to water approached $18 billion before a single aircraft landed on its deck. It carries 75 aircraft on a flight deck covering 6.4 acres. Its 2 nuclear reactors will run for 25 years without refueling, which sounds efficient until you learn that the midlife overhaul of those reactors will eventually require costs another $3 to $4 billion on its own. Factor in 50 years of operating costs, maintenance, upgrades, and decommissioning, and the Ford's true lifetime price approaches $50 billion. For one ship. The United States Navy operates 11 of them. The Ford is the most expensive thing any Navy has ever put in the water, and it is not particularly close. The most expensive tank ever built, the Panzer VIII Maus. The Panzer VIII Maus cost Germany something it could not afford in 1944. Time, steel, and engineering talent spent on a machine that could never influence the war it was being built for. At 188 metric tons, it consumed raw materials equivalent to building roughly 3 to 4 Tiger I tanks for each prototype completed. 2 were built at a cost equivalent to roughly $30 million each today. Neither fired a shot in combat. The Maus was so heavy, it destroyed every bridge it attempted to cross. So the solution was to drive it along the riverbed, submerged, breathing through an air hose while hoping nothing failed underwater. Its engine could not simultaneously power the tracks and the turret. The crew chose one or the other at any given moment. When Soviet forces closed in on the testing grounds in 1945, Germany destroyed both prototypes themselves. The total investment in engineering hours, specialized materials, and manufacturing capacity produced 2 immobile curiosities that the enemy never had to engage. The most expensive tank program that never fought. The most expensive submarine program in Soviet history. The Typhoon class. The Soviet Union spent approximately $1.5 billion per submarine in 1980s dollars building the Typhoon class, roughly $4 to $5 billion each in today's money. The total program exceeded $25 billion. For that expenditure, the Soviet Navy received the largest submarines ever built, 574 feet long, displacing 48,000 metric tons submerged, each carrying 20 ballistic missiles capable of delivering nuclear warheads to targets thousands of miles away. The interior was built for extended deterrence patrols that could last months without surfacing. A swimming pool, a sauna, a common room with plants and birds maintained specifically to protect crew morale. What the program cost did not purchase was longevity. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the budget required to maintain submarines of this complexity collapsed alongside it. Most were scrapped, several with financial assistance from the United States under arms reduction treaties. The last hull was decommissioned in 2023. The most expensive submarine program in Soviet history ended in a museum proposal. The most expensive military hovercraft ever produced, the Zubr class. Each Zubr class hovercraft costs approximately $30 to $50 million to build. At 187 feet in length, it carries 3 main battle tanks or 500 fully equipped troops across open water at 60 knots, and delivers them not merely onto a beach, but directly across it and inland without stopping. It can access 73% of the world's coastlines. Conventional landing craft reach approximately 15%. That gap in operational reach is what the price buys. Russia built several. Ukraine operated them before 2022. China purchased 2 and studied them with the kind of attention that suggested they intended to build their own. The 5 enormous propellers generating the air cushion consume fuel at rates that make every deployment expensive well beyond the purchase price. When the full accounting of a single amphibious operation using this platform is complete, the number climbs significantly past the unit cost. The Zubr arrives loud, fast, and expensive. By the time a defending force registers what is happening, it has already happened. The most expensive artillery piece ever fired in combat, the Schwerer Gustav. The Schwerer Gustav cost Germany approximately $250 million in today's money to build, transport, and position for a single operational deployment. Getting it to a firing position required weeks of dedicated railway engineering, a purpose-built curved track spur simply to rotate the barrel, and a crew of over 2,500 soldiers to operate and defend, a labor cost amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars per day before a shell was loaded. Each shell weighed 7 metric tons. The complete assembly stretched nearly 1,500 feet. In its only confirmed combat deployment at Sevastopol in 1942, it fired approximately 48 rounds. It fired an estimated 30 more during the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, bringing its total combat rounds to roughly 78. When the cost of each round is calculated against the total investment in transportation, infrastructure, assembly, crew, and manufacturing, the price per shell delivered is one of the most expensive figures in the history of artillery. The targets it destroyed could have been reached by conventional bombing at a fraction of the cost. It was the largest artillery piece ever fired in combat, and a demonstration of what happens when a military organization pursues technical scale with no constraint on cost effectiveness. The Germans destroyed it themselves rather than allow capture. The most expensive production helicopter ever built, the CH-53K King Stallion. The Sikorsky CH-53K King Stallion costs approximately $122 to $144 million per aircraft, a price tag that matches and at times exceeds the unit cost of an F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. For a helicopter, the Marine Corps commissioned it to replace the aging CH-53E Super Stallion, and the price became immediately controversial. 3 General Electric T408 turboshaft engines, each producing 7,500 horsepower, give it the ability to lift 27,000 pounds of external cargo, nearly triple what its predecessor could manage. Its composite rotor system, digital fly-by-wire controls, and advanced avionics are each individually expensive to design and produce. The total program, covering 200 aircraft for the Marine Corps, is projected to cost approximately $26 to $27 billion, $19.2 billion in procurement plus $6.9 billion in research and development. That works out to approximately $130 million per helicopter, for a machine whose primary mission is moving heavy cargo. For the Marine Corps, which operates in environments where no cheaper alternative performs the same mission, the argument is that no other option exists. That argument is easier to accept when you consider the alternative is leaving troops and equipment stranded in terrain that nothing else can reach. It is harder to accept when the helicopter costs more per unit than most of the fighter jets it operates alongside. The most expensive battleship ever constructed, the Iowa class. Each Iowa-class battleship cost the United States $100 million to build between 1940 and 1944, equivalent to approximately $1.65 billion in today's money. All 4 were completed. That makes the Iowa class the most expensive battleships ever built by any nation in absolute dollar terms. At 887 feet long and over 57,000 tons fully loaded, the Iowas were the last and largest battleships the United States would ever construct. Their 9 16-inch guns fired shells weighing 2,700 pounds to targets 24 miles away. Their 212,000 horsepower propulsion allowed sustained speeds of 33 knots, fast enough to escort the fast carrier task forces that were already making the battleship obsolete. The Yamato, Japan's enormous battleship and the heaviest ever built, cost approximately $58 million in equivalent $1940, roughly 40% less than a single Iowa. The Iowa class was more expensive, more capable, and far more strategically relevant. The 4 Iowas served in 5 separate conflicts across 5 decades: World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Lebanese Civil War, and Operation Desert Storm. The most expensive battleships ever built delivered more operational value per dollar than almost any warship in history. On a list defined by cost without return, the Iowa class stands as the exception. The most expensive bomber ever built, the B-2 Spirit. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber costs $2.1 billion per aircraft, when the total program cost of $44.75 billion is divided across the 21 aircraft built. That makes it the most expensive bomber ever placed in operational service, and the most expensive aircraft of any kind by a margin that no other program approaches. The next most expensive bomber, the Russian Tu-160 Blackjack, costs approximately $300 million per aircraft. The B-2 is 7 times that. Its manufacturing flyaway cost alone, just the physical price of building the aircraft before development costs are included, was $737 million per plane in 1997 dollars. The rest of the price comes from the research required to build an aircraft that is invisible to radar from all angles. Classified materials, purpose-built facilities, and maintenance systems designed for a machine that has no equivalent anywhere. Only 21 were produced. One was destroyed in a crash at Guam in 2008, a $1.4 billion write-off in under 2 minutes. Another was retired after fire damage in 2022. 19 remain. The total American investment in those 19 aircraft exceeds $100 billion when lifetime operating and sustainment costs are included. The B-2 is not merely the most expensive bomber. It is the most expensive aircraft ever placed in operational military service. The most expensive fighter jet ever built, the F-22 Raptor. The F-22 Raptor is the most expensive fighter jet per unit ever built, at approximately $350 million per aircraft, when the total program cost of $67 billion is divided across the 187 produced. The Air Force originally planned to buy 750. When those plans were cut, the development cost had to be absorbed by far fewer aircraft, driving the per-unit price to a figure no fighter program in history has matched. The F-22 was the world's first operational fifth-generation fighter, combining stealth, supercruise, super maneuverability, and sensor fusion in a single airframe for the first time. Each of those capabilities was genuinely unprecedented when the program began, which meant every component required original research: the radar-absorbing materials, the thrust vectoring engines, the avionics architecture that fuses data from multiple sensors into a single display for the pilot. None of it existed off a shelf. All of it cost money. The program was canceled before the planned fleet was complete because Congress concluded the per-unit price could not be justified. 187 Raptors were built. The Air Force now plans to begin retiring them before a direct replacement is ready. One of the rare instances in military history of a nation choosing to retire its most capable aircraft not because something better exists, but because maintaining it costs nearly as much as building it did. The most expensive wheeled military vehicle ever built, the MAZ-7907. Only 2 MAZ-7907s were ever built, and they represent one of the most complete procurement miscalculations of the Cold War. Each cost an estimated $5 to $10 million to manufacture, but that captures only the unit price. The real investment was the engineering program behind them. The MAZ-7907 rode on 12 axles carrying 24 wheels, measured 114 feet in length, and weighed 360 metric tons at full load. Each wheel was independently driven by its own electric motor, powered by a gas turbine mounted on the vehicle. The diesel-electric principle used in locomotives applied to a road vehicle of unprecedented scale. The drivetrain required years of dedicated development. The articulating frame that allowed navigation of turns, because conventional steering at that mass is mechanically impossible, was itself a significant engineering program. The MAZ-7907 could carry 220 metric tons of payload across terrain that would defeat any smaller vehicle. The missile systems it was designed to transport were replaced by newer technology before the vehicles entered service. Neither was ever used operationally. They are the most expensive road vehicles ever constructed for a purpose that ceased to exist before they could serve it. The most expensive canceled military project in history, the Landkreuzer P-1000 Rada. The Landkreuzer P-1000 Rada never moved. It was never built. It existed only in drawings produced by German engineers in 1942. Drawings attached to cost estimates indicating that building a single ROT would consume resources equivalent to manufacturing over 1,000 conventional tanks. At a proposed weight of 1,000 metric tons, more than 5 times heavier than the Maus, it would have carried a turret mounting 2 naval guns taken directly from a battleship. It would have required its own dedicated power infrastructure to move. It would have been visible from miles away, unable to cross any bridge ever constructed, and vulnerable to any aircraft that found it. Hitler considered the proposal. Engineers presented it seriously. The program was canceled in 1943 before a single component entered production. The most expensive military machine ever proposed cost nothing to build and would have cost everything to build. The gap between what it would have consumed and what it would have achieved remains the most extreme example of military procurement ambition fully detached from military reality. The most expensive military drone in operational service, the RQ-4 Global Hawk. The RQ-4 Global Hawk costs approximately $220 million per aircraft, making it the most expensive unmanned aerial vehicle in operational service. The total program cost across all variants has exceeded $10 billion. For that investment, the United States Air Force operates a drone that flies at 60,000 feet for up to 34 hours without landing, watching everything below it with sensors that resolve objects inches apart from altitudes where the aircraft itself is invisible. It carries no weapons. The entire price is the capability to observe. Its 130-foot wingspan is dictated by the fuel load required to sustain 34-hour missions at altitude. The sensor suite includes synthetic aperture radar, electro-optical systems, and signals intelligence equipment, feeding a continuous operational picture to commanders who may be on a different continent. Every other machine on this list was built to destroy, carry, or withstand. The Global Hawk was built to know. In modern warfare, that knowledge, where the enemy is, what they are moving, what decision they are about to make, frequently determines the outcome before the first weapon is fired. The $220 million per aircraft is the cost of that knowledge. Every military that can afford it is acquiring it. That is the true cost of the most expensive military machines ever built. 12 categories, 12 price tags that most people never see the full picture of until now. If this video gave you a number that genuinely surprised you, subscribe to The Price Explainer and hit the bell. Every week, we go deeper into what things actually cost, the real figures, the hidden layers, and the stories behind the price tags that the headlines never fully tell. The next one is already coming, and the number is going to be bigger than you think.